I was halfway through passing the mashed potatoes when my sister Nicole stood up at Christmas dinner, lifted her wine glass, and told the whole table that the family deserved honesty this year. Then she smiled directly at me. She announced, in a voice she had clearly practiced, that I had been hiding the fact that I was about to lose my house. The room went so quiet I could hear the lights on the Christmas tree buzzing in the corner. My mother set her fork down. My brother-in-law stared very hard at the edge of the tablecloth. My niece whispered, "What?" in the horrified way that only young people still can. And before I had even fully registered what was happening, Nicole added that she was only bringing it up because secrets poison families. She delivered that line with the kind of steady, righteous calm that told me she had been saving it for weeks. I sat there with the serving spoon still in my hand. I looked at her face and I saw it clearly. The thing I had been quietly aware of for a long time, but had kept talking myself out of. This was not a slip. This was not wine and poor judgment. Nicole had dressed up carefully that evening, driven to my mother's house, eaten appetizers, and waited for the exact right moment when everyone was settled and warm and full enough to be slow. Then she had stood up and done what she came to do. She had planned this down to the serving spoon. I set the spoon on the edge of the bowl and looked around the table at the faces of people I had known my entire life. Every one of them was now looking at me with that particular expression. The soft, urgent look people get when they believe they are watching someone fall apart. I was not falling apart. But I was very, very still. My name is Janet Holloway. I am 61 years old, widowed, and I have spent most of my life being the quiet sister in a family that mistakes quiet for weakness. My husband passed away 6 years ago. Since then, I have lived alone in the house we spent 28 years paying off together. It sits at the end of a short street in a neighborhood that has not changed much since we moved in. The floors are slightly uneven in the back hallway. The kitchen window sticks in August. I know every inch of it the way you only know a place you have grieved inside. I do bookkeeping for 2 local small businesses, a hardware store and a catering company. Between those and the careful way I managed things after my husband died, I am not wealthy, but I am stable. And I know the difference between those two things. My bills are paid. My mortgage is nearly done. My savings are modest and honest and real. I do not make scenes. I do not overshare at family gatherings. I bring a side dish and I listen more than I talk, and I drive home at a reasonable hour. This is the life I built, and I built it deliberately because I know who I am and what I value. Nicole has always found my quietness convenient. She is 3 years younger than me and has operated her entire life as though the space I left by not competing was simply open for her to fill. She is charming and persuasive, and she reads people the way a pickpocket reads a crowd. She knows exactly how to seem concerned while doing damage. When she stood up at Christmas dinner with her wine glass and her righteous smile, she was counting on all of it. My quietness, my dignity, my refusal to make a scene at our mother's table. She knew me very well. What she did not know was that I had also been paying attention. The lie landed in stages, which is how the good ones always do. First came my mother's gasp, short and soft, the kind that signals real distress rather than performance. That sound did more damage than anything Nicole had said, because my mother is not dramatic. If she gasped, people in that room would think there was something worth gasping about. Then came Nicole's follow-through, which was where you could see the craft in it. She did not stop at the announcement. She leaned into the table the way someone leans in when they have more to say and are trying to manage how it lands. She said she hated being the one to bring this to the surface. She said she had been carrying the weight of knowing for weeks. She looked at me with that soft, careful expression and said she could not keep watching me pretend everything was fine. The room was still listening the way people listen when they believe something true is being said. She looked right at me and said, "You can be honest now, Janet. We all know. I had never wanted to slap a person more in my life, and I have wanted to slap a few people." What made it worse was the specific cruelty of that last sentence. You can be honest now, as if I had been performing in front of these people. As if the life I had built, carefully and honestly and without asking anyone for a thing had actually been a long, sad act I was finally being given permission to drop. My niece was still staring. My brother-in-law had picked up his fork, but was not using it. My mother was looking at me with that particular expression parents get when they believe they already know the answer, but are waiting for their child to confirm it. I breathed once, slowly, and I did not say anything yet. Nicole did not stop with the announcement. That was the thing about her. She never stopped at the door. She always walked all the way in and rearranged the furniture. She told the table that the bank had already sent final notices to my house. She said I was carrying debt that had become unmanageable, and that I had privately reached out to her for help and begged her to keep it to herself. She even added, with a small, sympathetic tilt of her head, that I had been quietly talking about moving away after the new year, before things got resolved the hard way. Each piece of information she added was specific enough to sound like it had been told in confidence. That was the design of it. Vague lies fall apart quickly. Detailed lies travel further because the detail itself reads as proof. If someone mentions the bank sent notices, people think, how would she know that unless she was told? I watched the table absorb it. One of my cousins, sitting near the far end, nodded slightly, in the way people nod when a thing they suspected has just been confirmed. She had not suspected anything. She was simply nodding along the way people do when they do not want to seem like they are behind everyone else. My mother had both hands flat on the tablecloth now. Nicole finished speaking and looked around the room with that quiet satisfaction that she always kept just below the surface of her expressions, so it could not be directly named. Then she sat back down, picked up her wine glass, and took a small measured sip. She had done it. She had turned Christmas dinner into a referendum on my life, and she had done it in the span of about 4 minutes. 4 minutes of practiced, detailed, emotionally calibrated fiction, delivered to a room full of people who loved me but had no particular reason, in that moment, to disbelieve her. Not yet. I did not argue right away. I want to be clear about that, because it became the most important thing I did that evening. And it was not easy. Every part of me wanted to stand up and say clearly and loudly that none of it was true. That I had no debt, no bank notices, no plan to leave, no conversation with Nicole in which I had asked her for anything at all. The urge to correct it immediately was physical, like the urge to pull your hand back from something hot. But I had spent 61 years watching what happens when people react to performance with emotion. The performer wins. Emotion looks like guilt to a room that does not know the facts yet, and Nicole knew this better than anyone. So instead, I set down the serving spoon carefully on the edge of the bowl. I folded my napkin and placed it on the table. I looked at Nicole directly and asked one question in an even, quiet voice. I asked, when exactly did I tell you all of this? The table went still again in a different way. It was a clean question with no heat in it, which meant it was harder to dismiss than an outburst would have been. Nicole blinked once. Then she smiled, the slightly strained smile of someone who has been asked a question they were not prepared to answer. She said she was not going to repeat private conversations in front of the whole family and humiliate me further. That answer told me everything I needed to know. She had not prepared a specific response because she had not expected to need one. She had expected tears or anger or desperate denial. She had expected emotion, because emotion was the thing she could work with. Instead, I had asked her for a date and a location, and she had nothing. I picked up my fork and returned to my dinner without another word. The truth about Nicole's situation was not hard to find once I decided to look directly at it. A property developer had been circling our neighborhood for about 8 months. The street Nicole lived on was 2 blocks from mine, and she owned a house there that she and her husband had been struggling under for years. They had taken out a second mortgage 3 years earlier, during a period when they were overconfident about their financial direction, and that second mortgage had been quietly grinding them ever since. The developer needed a connected parcel of properties to make his investment work at the scale he was planning. The more houses in the area that agreed to sell, the higher the collective offer climbed. Nicole's house was in the cluster he was building. Mine was on the edge of it, technically outside the cluster, but significant because it occupied a corner lot that changed the shape and value of the whole deal. She had come to me in late summer and explained it calmly, almost reasonably, the first time. She said the timing was right. She said the market was favorable. She said we could both benefit. I told her no. My house was not an asset I was ready to convert. It was the place my husband and I had built a life. I was not interested in trading it for a number on a check. She came back twice more in the autumn, each time with a slightly different approach. A little more urgency. A little more emphasis on how much the developer's offer was growing. A little more edge underneath the practical language. Each time I said the same thing. I was not interested. What I did not fully understand at Christmas, sitting at my mother's table with a serving spoon in my hand, was that Nicole had decided my no was not going to be the end of the conversation. She had simply moved it to a room I did not know she had entered. My husband was a quiet man with practical habits, and one of them was that he liked to know what was happening in his house. When we first moved in, he installed a simple outdoor camera above the front door that recorded the porch, mostly because of a rash of car break-ins on the block that year. The camera became part of the house the same way the sticky kitchen window and the uneven hallway did. It just existed. After he died and I was living alone, I added a second small camera inside the dining room. Nothing elaborate. A modest device mounted in the upper corner near the bookshelf, angled toward the front entry and the dining table where I did most of my living and entertaining. I did it after I had some packages go missing from the porch, and a locksmith told me people sometimes watched houses where they knew a woman lived alone. It made me feel slightly safer, and I forgot about it within a month, because that is what safety equipment is supposed to do when it is working. The night of Christmas dinner, I drove home slowly with the window cracked, because the cold air was the only thing keeping my thoughts in a straight line. I made tea. I did not drink, and sat at my kitchen table for a long time. Then I remembered something. Nicole had come to visit me alone, 2 weeks before Christmas. We had spoken in the dining room, standing at the table with our coats half on, because she had not intended to stay long. We had talked for nearly 30 minutes. I had said no again, firmly, in a way that had made her jaw tighten. I got up from the table and walked to the small laptop on the counter. I opened the camera app and scrolled back 2 weeks. There she was. The footage was clear. Nicole was standing at my dining room table in a camel-colored coat, stirring coffee she had not finished, looking at me the way she looks at things she intends to eventually have. The angle of the camera caught both of us well, slightly from above, the way those corner-mounted devices tend to see a room. I watched myself in the video, which is always a strange thing to do. I was wearing the gray cardigan I keep on the hook near the back door. My hands were around my own mug. My posture was the posture of someone who had already heard the same question several times and was giving it the same honest answer she had always given. The audio was clear enough. Nicole was telling me the developer needed an answer before the end of January. She said the collective offer number had gone up again and that I was leaving significant money on the table by waiting. She was using the careful, measured tone she uses when she is trying to sound like she is not pressuring you, which is exactly how you know she is pressuring you. I watched myself on that screen say, calmly and without any meanness, that I appreciated her explaining it again, but that my answer had not changed. I was not selling. My house was my home, and I intended to keep it. Nicole set her coffee cup down. The temperature of her expression shifted in a way the camera caught cleanly. The practiced warmth stepped back. Something harder came forward. She said, fine. She said it in the flat, final way that means nothing about the situation is actually fine. Then she said something that I had carried in my chest since that afternoon, but had not let myself fully sit with until I watched it play out on a screen in my own kitchen at midnight with a cup of cold tea beside me. What Nicole said next on that recording was this. She leaned slightly forward across my dining room table and said, in a voice that had gone thin and tight the way her voice gets when she stops performing and starts meaning it. Fine. But if you won't do this the easy way, Don't cry when the family finds out how bad things really are. She said it quietly, almost gently. The way a person says something they have already decided is a promise rather than a threat. Then she straightened up, picked up her bag from the back of the chair, and adjusted her coat. She said she hoped I would think it over. She said she only wanted what was best for the family. Then she left through my front door, and the camera captured the door closing behind her. I sat at my kitchen table and watched that clip 3 times. There are moments when something you already knew becomes something you have seen. They are not the same thing. I had known that Nicole had been pushing hard and that she was willing to use pressure to get what she wanted. I had felt the edge of that threat when she said it in person 2 weeks before Christmas and had tucked the discomfort away because I had not wanted to look at it directly. Watching it on a screen was different. On a screen, it was no longer something I could second-guess or soften with the habit of long family loyalty. It was evidence. It was her voice and her posture and her words in my own dining room, with the date and time stamped along the bottom of the frame. She had threatened me because I refused to sell. Then she had carried out the threat. And she had done both of those things in a room she did not know was watching. I closed the laptop. I did not sleep much. By the time I was making coffee the next morning, my phone had collected 11 messages. My mother had texted at 7, which meant she had been awake and thinking about it since before sunrise. The message asked if I was really in trouble, and told me not to be proud about asking for help. She had used the word trouble twice in 4 sentences. A cousin I spoke to twice a year had sent the name and phone number of a bankruptcy attorney, written out in full, as if typing the digits carefully enough would make the gesture more useful. Another relative, one of the kinder ones, sent a long message saying she understood how embarrassing it must be and asking if I needed a place to stay after January. She had used the phrase "we all go through hard times" in a way that made it clear she believed she was being generous. I read every single message without answering any of them. Nicole's lie had moved overnight, with the speed that only family gossip reaches. It had been absorbed by people who loved me and people who barely knew me alike. And it had been passed along in each case, with the small adjustments every rumor picks up as it travels. By the time it reached the cousin who sent the attorney's number, it had probably grown into something slightly worse than what Nicole had actually said at the table. That is how these things work. I made my coffee and sat at the window and looked at the street outside. I thought about what my husband would have said. He would have been very quiet for a moment, the way he got quiet when something needed to be handled rather than reacted to. Then he probably would have said something dry and practical like, "Well, what do you have?" I thought about that. I thought about what I actually had. Then I put the phone face down on the counter and started making a list. My daughter Nora lives about 2 hours away and comes when she can, which is not as often as either of us would like, but more often than either of us says. She called me the morning after Christmas, in a state that I recognized as the specific combination of furious and frightened that she has had since she was a child, when something has upset the people she loves, and she does not yet know what to do about it. I could hear her trying to hold it steady while she talked. She said she had heard about my supposed financial collapse from her aunt. Not from me. From Nicole, who had apparently called Nora early that morning to check in and offer support, and in doing so ensured that Nora heard the full story from Nicole's direction before she heard anything from mine. That part hurt in a different way from everything else. Nicole had embarrassed me at a dinner table, and that was ugly. But going to my daughter before I had a chance to speak to her myself was something else entirely. It was an attempt to get there first. To plant the version of events in the one relationship that actually mattered to me before I could offer any correction. I told Nora to stop talking and listen for a moment. I told her that none of what Nicole had said was true. I told her my house was fine, my finances were fine, and that I needed her to come over that evening if she could manage it. She said, of course. I told her to bring a flash drive. She went quiet for a second and then asked, with the particular steadiness she has inherited from her father, What exactly was on the camera? I told her she would see when she got here. I could hear the shift in her breathing when she understood what I meant. Nora arrived at 6:30 with a bag over her shoulder and a tightness around her eyes that told me she had been running through possibilities the whole drive over. She sat down at my kitchen table without taking off her coat, which is what she does when she is not ready to settle yet. I made tea and brought it to the table, and then I opened the laptop and played the footage without making a speech about it. I played the clip from 2 weeks before Christmas, all the way through. I let her watch her aunt in that camel coat stirring coffee and telling me to sell and going cold when I would not, and then I let her hear the words, spoken clearly in her aunt's own voice, on a date stamped along the bottom of the screen. Nora watched the whole thing without moving. Her arms were folded so tightly across her chest, they looked like they were holding something in. When it finished, she sat for a moment with her eyes still on the screen. Then she said it in the plain, direct way she has always had when she has worked something out. She said, "Mom, she didn't make a mistake at dinner. She set you up." I had known it since the night before. I had felt it in my chest the whole drive home from my mother's house. But there is a specific difference between knowing something and hearing it said out loud by someone who has just seen the same evidence you have. It makes the thing real in a different way. Solid. Unmovable. It stopped being a family argument that could be resolved with an awkward phone call. It became a plan someone had made and carried out deliberately. And now we were simply deciding what to do about it. I told Nora I needed to show her one more thing before we talked. 2 days after Christmas, a letter arrived in my mailbox. It was from the development company. A thick cream envelope with a business logo in the top left corner, addressed to my house specifically by name and street. Inside was a one-page letter on formal stationery describing what it called a final collective neighborhood premium. The developer was offering an elevated price per property to the remaining households on and around my street who had not yet agreed to sell, conditional on all of them signing before the end of January. The language was professional and measured. There was a number in the letter that was larger than the number Nicole had mentioned during the summer conversations, and larger again than the number she had brought to my table in November. I read it standing at the mailbox in the cold with my coat open. Then I read it again inside at the kitchen table. The timeline of everything Nicole had done rearranged itself as I looked at that letter. She had spent the autumn pressuring me to sell. She had received no as her answer each time. She had come to my house 2 weeks before Christmas, threatened me quietly in my own dining room, and then gone to my mother's Christmas table and publicly told a room full of family that I was about to lose that house. All of that had happened during the exact window when the developer's deadline was tightest and the collective offer was largest. This was not someone who had been cruel for the sake of being cruel. This was someone who had been cruel in service of a specific financial goal that required my cooperation and had decided that if she could not get my cooperation directly, she would manufacture a situation that pressured me into it another way. The letter was not evidence of wrongdoing on anyone's part. But sitting beside everything else I had gathered, it completed the picture clearly. I put it with the other documents. I gave my mother the chance to step back. I want to say that clearly, because some people reading this might think I should have gone further faster. And I want them to understand that she is my mother, and I am 61 years old. And those two facts together mean something to me that I am not going to apologize for. I invited her for coffee 3 days after Christmas. I drove to her house rather than asking her to come to mine, which I did deliberately because I wanted her to be comfortable and not defensive. I made the drive in under 20 minutes and sat across from her at the table where I had sat at every important conversation of my childhood. I told her simply that Nicole's version of events was not accurate. I did not show her the footage yet. I just told her, plainly, that there was no debt, no bank notice, no collapse, and no conversation in which I had confided any of that to Nicole. My mother looked at me for a moment. Then she said Nicole was only worried about me. She said if I had simply been more open with the family, Nicole would not have felt the need to raise it. That was when I understood that my mother was not neutral. She had never been neutral when it came to Nicole. Nicole was the charming one, the one who called every Sunday, the one who had always known how to be in a room in a way that my mother found easy to love. I had always been the steady one, which in family terms often means the one who is taken for granted because nothing appears to be wrong. I finished my coffee. I told my mother I hoped she would be open to hearing more soon. I drove home and crossed one source of fairness off my list. I was going to have to bring the room to the evidence myself. Nicole texted me that weekend. The message came on a Saturday afternoon when I was sitting in my house doing the quarterly books for the hardware store. I heard my phone buzz on the counter and looked over and saw her name and felt the particular tiredness that comes when someone who has done something significant keeps pretending they have not. She wrote that she knew I was hurt and that she understood why. She said the truth had a way of surfacing when families needed it, and that she had only acted out of concern. She said she hoped we could work through the awkwardness together as sisters and move past it toward something better. The word she used was awkwardness. I read the message twice. I set the phone back down and sat for a moment looking at the column of numbers in front of me. Awkwardness. She had stood up at Christmas dinner, in front of our mother and our cousins and our niece, and told a detailed and deliberate lie about my financial situation. She had threatened me on camera 2 weeks earlier, when I refused to cooperate with her plan. She had called my daughter the morning after Christmas, before I had the chance to speak to Nora myself. She had done all of this in service of a property deal that would have benefited her own deteriorating finances at the cost of my home. And the word she was using for it was awkwardness. I took a screenshot of the message and saved it to the folder I had been building. Then I typed back 3 words. "Thank you, Nicole." She replied with a heart and said she was so glad we could communicate. I put the phone face down and went back to the numbers in front of me. I had a New Year's dinner to plan, and I needed to focus. A few days later, I went back through more of the camera footage, not because I was expecting anything in particular, but because I was being thorough. I had learned a long time ago that thoroughness is its own kind of protection. In the recordings from early November, I found a second visit. Nicole had come over on a weekday afternoon, a Tuesday, I thought, about 6 weeks before Christmas. I had served tea, because I always serve tea. We had sat at the same dining room table, in the same view of the camera, and had a longer conversation than the December one. In this earlier visit, Nicole was more open about the specifics than she had been later. She said the developer needed my parcel specifically, because of the corner position. She used the phrase "complete the line" twice, by which she meant that my property connected the cluster of lots he needed in a way that changed the shape and value of the deal for everyone involved. Then she said something I had not retained from that afternoon because it had seemed almost too nakedly selfish to be worth keeping. She said that once I sold, she and her husband could finally clear their second mortgage. She said it with a small laugh, lightly, as if it were an obvious and reasonable thing to mention. Then she smiled and said, "So really, you would be helping the family." I sat in my kitchen watching that clip and felt something go still inside me. She had said it plainly. She had said it on camera in my house. She needed my house to fix her own financial problem. She had called it helping the family with a smile. And when I had continued refusing, she had eventually decided that manufactured family pressure was the next logical tool. I saved the clip to the same folder as everything else. I invited everyone back for New Year's dinner about a week after Christmas. Not the entire extended family. I kept the list deliberately small, exactly the people who had been at the Christmas table, plus 2 additional relatives who had contacted me in the days after Christmas to ask about my situation. The people Nicole had reached fastest. The people whose version of events was most contaminated by what she had said. I wrote the invitation carefully. I said I hated how tense things had become at Christmas, and that I thought the best way to start the new year was with a clean, honest evening together before it was over. I said I was cooking and I hoped everyone would come. I did not say anything about what the evening would actually involve. Nicole responded within an hour. She said she would be there and that she was so glad I was taking the initiative. She used the phrase moving forward, which people use when they believe the thing that happened is behind them. She thought I was coming to heal. I knew that because I know my sister, and I know the specific quality of her enthusiasm when she believes she has won something. The speed of her reply told me she had been waiting to see what I would do next. And the relief in her words told me she had assumed I would do the quiet, dignified thing I had always done before. Absorb it, recover in private. Never make it public because the family deserves peace, and I am the steady one. The rest of the acceptances came in over the next 2 days. My mother said she was glad I was being mature about it, which told me she had spoken to Nicole, and that Nicole had framed whatever was coming as a reset. I confirmed the date and time with everyone and began preparing the room. I had a very specific idea about how the evening should go. I spent the days between Christmas and New Year's preparing a folder. Not a metaphorical folder. An actual one, the kind with the 3 brass prongs in the middle and the 2 inside pockets. The sort I use for client files at the hardware store and the catering company. I chose a plain blue one because it was the color I use for documents that need to be taken seriously. Inside, I placed things in a specific order. My current mortgage statement was first. The one showing the balance and the payment history, both current and consistent, and moving steadily toward a final payoff date that was less than 2 years away. Behind that went the most recent property tax receipt, paid in full. Behind that went a 1-page summary of my savings account, not because the amount was large, but because it was real and positive and unambiguous. Then came the developer's letter, printed cleanly and placed so it could be lifted out and passed around. Then came Nicole's text messages, the ones where she called what she had done awkwardness and expressed relief that we were communicating. The video clips were saved on a flash drive tucked into the inside pocket of the folder, already loaded onto the laptop and queued in sequence. The small television set that usually sat on the counter in my living room was moved to its own wheeled stand 2 days before New Year's and positioned beside the dining room hutch where it could be seen from every seat at the table. I did not prepare a speech. I have always been suspicious of speeches because they give the speaker control at the cost of the listener's trust. I did not want to convince anyone of anything. I wanted to show them something and let them draw their own conclusions in their own time. That is a very different kind of room to build, and it requires a very different kind of preparation. New Year's dinner began the way all family meals in our family begin, with the small, careful warmth of people who are slightly on guard, but do not want to show it. My mother arrived first and hugged me longer than usual, which I took to mean she was feeling guilty about the coffee conversation without being ready to say so. My niece came with her parents and spent the first 20 minutes helping me carry things from the kitchen because she always had good instincts about when to make herself useful. I was grateful for that. It kept my hands busy. Nicole arrived 40 minutes in, which was just late enough to enter a room that was already settled and warm. She was wearing a cream-colored cashmere sweater. Her hair was done. She brought a bottle of wine and set it on the counter with both hands wrapped around the neck of it in a way that looked gracious and relaxed. She hugged me. She smelled like the same perfume she had worn at Christmas. She said the house looked wonderful. I thanked her and handed her a glass of water while the wine breathed. We ate. The food was good and I had made enough of it, which meant the first hour passed in the comfortable way that good meals create when people let them. Conversation moved around the table in its natural way. My niece made everyone laugh twice. My brother-in-law talked about a project at work. My mother asked about the catering company's Christmas orders. Nicole participated warmly in all of it. Halfway through dessert, she looked at me with that small, pitying smile she had been wearing since Christmas and said she hoped we could all move into the new year without more secrecy. She said it twice. I listened to her say it the second time, and then I set down my fork and stood up. I stood up and thanked everyone for coming. I said it sincerely, because I meant it. Every person at that table had taken time out of the last days of the year to be in my house, and whatever was about to happen had not been their choice to be part of. I was aware of that, and I wanted them to know I was aware. Then I said I agreed with Nicole completely. There had been too much secrecy. I said it was time to clear the air properly before the new year started, and that I thought the best way to do that was to share some things I should have shared sooner. I reached over and wheeled the small television stand out from beside the dining room hutch until it was visible from every seat at the table. Then I opened the laptop on the side table beside it where I had set it up before dinner. Nicole's expression changed in stages. The confident, pitying warmth held for a moment, because her face had practice at holding expressions that no longer matched the situation. But as she registered the television, the laptop, the deliberate positioning of both, something shifted underneath the surface of it. She said my name in a tone that was meant to sound grounding and calm, the tone she uses when she is trying to slow something down. I did not look at her. I looked at the table and said that Nicole had told the family 2 weeks ago that I was hiding serious financial problems. I said she had told everyone I had confided in her and asked for help. I said I had not disputed that at Christmas because I had not been ready then. Then I said I was ready now. For the first time in her life, my sister lost the color in her face before she lost her words. I played the clip from 2 weeks before Christmas. The room watched my dining room appear on the screen. The camera angle was slightly high and wide, the way those corner-mounted devices see, so you could see both of us clearly, the table between us, the coffee cups, the daylight through the window behind me. Nicole was in her camel coat. The date stamp in the lower corner of the screen read the exact date, clear and unambiguous. You could hear both of us. Nicole telling me the developer needed an answer. Nicole giving me the numbers. Nicole's voice changing register when I said no again, going from practiced warmth into the flat, tight tone underneath it. Then her words, spoken in her own voice in my own dining room, telling me that if I would not do this the easy way, I should not cry when the family found out how bad things really are. The room was completely still. My brother-in-law, who had spent Christmas dinner staring at the tablecloth, was now sitting very straight in his chair, with both hands flat in front of him. My niece had both hands over her mouth. My mother, who had set down her wine glass at the first moment Nicole appeared on screen, had not picked it back up. Nicole started to speak once, just a breath and the beginning of a syllable, and then seemed to think better of it. I let the clip run to its natural end, which was the door of my house closing behind her. Then I let the room sit in the silence for a moment. Nobody looked at Nicole. That was the thing I noticed most. Everyone was looking at the screen, or at the table, or at their hands. Nobody had turned to her yet to offer her the kind of gentle sideways look that would have started the process of softening what they had just seen. I reached for the laptop. I played the November clip without commentary. The room had already settled into a different kind of attention, the careful, quiet kind that comes when people understand they are watching something that requires their full concentration. Nobody reached for their drinks. Nobody shifted in their chair. The clip opened with Nicole already at the table, already talking, already in the middle of making her case with the confident, reasonable energy she used when she believed she was the most informed person in a room. She explained the developer's plan in detail. She named the money her household stood to clear once the collective deal went through. She said it again, the phrase complete the line, and explained clearly that my property's corner position was the piece that changed the value of the whole arrangement for all of the sellers. Then she said, with the light little laugh she uses when she is trying to make something transactional sound warm, that clearing the second mortgage would be such a relief. She said it the way someone says a thing they'd consider obvious. Then she looked at me and said, so really, you would be helping the family. Then came the line that did the rest of the work for me. She looked at the version of me sitting across that table in November and said, you always were too sentimental to know when something's worth cashing in. That sentence sat in the room the way certain things sit when they have been heard by the right people, at the right moment. It did not disappear into the air. It hung there with the specific weight of something said by exactly the wrong person at exactly the right time, for everyone else to understand the full shape of what they were dealing with. My niece lowered her hands from her mouth slowly. My brother-in-law exhaled once quietly and did not say anything. I let the clip finish. Then I closed the laptop. Nicole tried to speak. She said the videos lacked context. She said the camera had caught fragments of private conversations that were not representative of what she had actually meant. She said I was the one who had provoked these discussions by being unreasonable about the sale. That anyone who knew our family would understand that things got said in moments of frustration that did not reflect anyone's real intentions. She used the word context 3 times in the space of about a minute. I did not argue with any of it. I simply opened the blue folder and began placing things on the table one at a time, deliberately in the same order I had arranged them at home. I took out the mortgage statement and placed it in front of my mother, who was the nearest person. I said this was my current mortgage, which showed no missed payments and a payoff date in under 2 years. I placed the property tax receipt beside it, paid in full. I placed the savings summary beside that. Then I took out the developer's letter and laid it on top of the others, so that everyone could see the date and the language about the collective offer and the January deadline. Then I placed Nicole's printed text messages on top of everything else. The ones where she described what she had done as awkwardness. The ones where she said she was glad we could communicate. I did not make a speech. The table was covered in paper, and the paper said what it said, and everyone in that room was honest enough to read. Nicole had tried to turn my family against me to force a property sale she needed for her own financial reasons. She had threatened me in my own home, and then carried out the threat. None of it was opinion, all of it was documented. And documented things have a quality that no amount of context can fully unsettle. The moment that changed the evening did not come from Nicole. She had already tried every version of herself she had available. The explanation, the reframe, the appeal to context. The tears, which arrived about 5 minutes after the documents went on the table, real enough in the physical sense, but coming at a time when the room had enough information to locate them accurately. The moment that mattered came from my mother. She had been quiet since the second clip ended. She was looking at the documents on the table. She looked at the savings statement and the mortgage page and the developer's letter and Nicole's texts. Then she looked at the frozen image of Nicole on the laptop screen, which I had paused rather than closed. Something moved in my mother's face. It was not a dramatic movement. It was small and slow, the way a thing moves when it has been held very still for a long time and has finally let go. Recognition. The particular kind that comes when evidence and history finally add up to something you had been arranging differently in your head for years. She turned to Nicole. She asked, in a voice I had never heard from her before, very quiet and entirely serious, whether Nicole had told her that Janet begged for help. She said she wanted a direct answer. Nicole said something about miscommunication. She said it started as concern. She said she might have phrased things wrong. My mother waited until she stopped. Then my mother said, "You told me she came to you crying. You told me she was ashamed to ask the family for help. Did you make that up?" Nicole started to cry properly then. Big, overwhelming tears, the kind that seemed designed to shift attention from the question to the questioner. She looked at my mother and then at me, but by that point the tears looked less like grief and more like weather. I did not yell. I did not catalog everything she had done in front of the room. I had already shown them the truth, and anything I added after that would have been for my benefit rather than theirs. And I am old enough to know the difference. I told Nicole to leave. I said it calmly and in front of everyone, because I was not going to manage her exit quietly, as though her comfort still deserved that consideration. She took her coat from the chair. One shoulder went in wrong because her hands were shaking. She did not say anything to me as she left. She said something to my mother, too quietly for me to hear. And my mother looked at the table rather than looking back. The door closed. My mother stayed and helped me clear the table in the way people help when they need something to do with their hands. After the dishes were done, she sat back down and apologized in a voice I had never heard from her before. I accepted it without making a production of it, because it was genuine and deserved a genuine response. We stayed at that table for another hour, talking honestly in a way we had not done in years. The developer's January deadline passed. Enough homeowners refused that the collective deal fell through. I kept my house. Nora drives up more often now. She comes on Sundays sometimes, and we cook together, and she stays the night in the room she grew up in. And we talk longer than we used to. That was something I had not known I was missing until I had it back. Nicole and I have not spoken. I have decided not to investigate what her situation looks like now, because what I already know is enough. I pressed play. I let the truth sit down at the table, and the truth, once it had a clear room and a reason to speak, did not get back up. If this story hit you somewhere deep, if you've ever been underestimated by the people who were supposed to protect you, or if you know what it feels like to have your voice taken away by someone who smiled while they did it, then you already know why Brooke's story matters. This is the kind of story we tell here. Real stakes, real consequences, real people who refuse to fold. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss the next one. Because the stories coming are even more powerful than this one. And you don't want to be the last person to hear them. And before you go, drop a comment and tell me, where are you watching from? And what part of Brooke's story hit you the hardest? Share this with someone who needs to hear that staying quiet can be the most powerful move you make, and that the truth always finds its way to the surface, no matter how deep someone tries to bury it. We'll see you in the next one.